And I said, I'm walking the Camino. And she said, alone? And she just talked to me and held me and blessed me. I've told people I've never felt more love, just love from complete strangers in an entire country than when I was in France.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. Today's guest is a lady who has a lot of different qualities and talents. She's a podcaster like me. She is an author like me, but she is also a screenwriter. I have no idea about screenwriting. And she is a connector of people. And I definitely want to know a lot more about that, what that means. And she grew up in different places. I want to talk about that. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Kirsten Rudberg. Did I say that right, Rudberg?
It's Kirsten Rudberg. So yeah, my father is Swedish and Norwegian.
Yep.
And he thinks that, the last name means from the Red Mountains. So our family grew up near a red mountain. That's what it means.
In Sweden, the Red Mountain
Yes.
in Sweden. Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yes.
But you were born in the US. No, you weren't born in the US. Where were you?
Yes. No. I was born in the US.
Okay.
And then I was about, I don't even know if I was 1 year old when we moved to Guyana in South America. And we lived there for a few years. Then we came back to the States for a couple of years. And then we went and lived in Lahore, Pakistan for 4 years. Then we came back again and I lived the rest of my life in the US, in Illinois.
How much do you remember from Guyana? Do you remember anything? You were small.
Yeah, it was pretty small, but I do have one memory that's so distinct. It's foggy but distinct. I remember walking out in the backyard and there were all these beautiful bushes. We were living in an apartment complex, or there were lots of buildings around us. And I was walking in the grass and there were these gorgeous bushes with these red, I thought they were flowers, whatever. I thought it should be put in my mouth. I was very excited about that. And I put it in my mouth, and to say that it was a hot pepper would be the understatement of the century. And my father, I remember him coming over because I was screaming. He said, "This isn't that hot. Look, I'll take a bite." And then he took a bite and then he was in pain. And so I kind of have that memory of being
The whole family was on fire.
Yes, exactly.
That's amazing. Did you ever go back?
No, I haven't been back yet. No, not yet. I've gone to other places, but not down there yet.
Okay, well, we'll get to the other places that you've gone to. But how about Lahore, Pakistan? That is an interest. Pakistan, that's a very, very different world to where you grew up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I went to the American school. And for me, of course, I had such a limited experience of the US at that point. For me, Lahore and the American school were normal for me. It was what I thought was the truth in the rest of the world, where you got to play with kids from all over the place. Who cared what your skin color was? Who cared what your religion was, your culture? But I remember a lot of Lahore. We got to travel while I lived there. We went to the Taj Mahal. My parents took me to Kashmir and we lived on a houseboat for a week. I got to see so many amazing things as a child. Especially I remember the monsoons and being so grateful when they started. It was really quite a singular childhood, really beautiful.
Pakistan is a very, very beautiful country.
It really is. It really is. And, as I've gotten older, my father's retired now, so he no longer travels for his job. But in the last years, when he was traveling over there, we started becoming a little more nervous because the anti-American sentiment, anti-Western sentiment is much greater than when we lived there so long ago. So I'm grateful he's not traveling there anymore. I certainly meet people from Pakistan who don't feel that way or are more open-minded, but I don't think I'd feel comfortable traveling there now.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not the people, is it? It's always the governments and the greed and the power game and whatever else. But we're not talking about that. This is a peaceful, non-political podcast.
Yes. Yay.
There's something that I noted, and it's called third culture kids.
Yes.
Explain. I didn't because you said it's in Wikipedia. I didn't check it, but what is that?
It's absolutely fascinating. And I didn't know about it until I started seminary and someone said, "Oh, you're a third culture kid." And I thought, what? What is that? So I, went on the interweb immediately and found it. It's on Wikipedia. And it's a whole psychological profile of children that grow up in cultures that are not their original own. It's so fascinating. And I'd always had people over the years tell me, the way you meet strangers or talk to people is so interesting, or it's so different, or you're so open. And I thought, okay, I guess that's just me. But then I read this Wikipedia entry and I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This is why I am the way I am. And it comes from growing up in a culture that wasn't my own. Or, I really grew up with cultures from all over the world, but in Lahore, which was a culture that wasn't my own. It's absolutely fascinating. The psychological research they've done, the kids tend to be more curious inherently, more open, more inquisitive about other people, more accepting, more tolerant. It's actually really fascinating. It's a fascinating area of study.
It's actually what all kids should be doing at the end of the day. Are you in touch with anybody from that school in Lahore?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. When I lived there, I had a dear, dear, dear friend, Vanessa. And of course, it was, you want to talk about hot and humid. Lahore was hot and humid. So
Mhm.
whenever we go visit friends, even during the school day, they had us play in the pool for an hour. Otherwise, we would have all melted. But I had a dear friend named Vanessa, and we'd go visit her every once in a while at our apartment complex, and we'd play in the pool. Some of my most fondest memories. I just loved it. She was Canadian, loved her so much. And, gosh, years passed. Of course, we move away. 30 years later, she found me on Facebook. And she said, "Are you the little girl that I played with as a kid?" And now we're connected. And it's absolutely fabulous and made my heart sing because I thought, oh, these beautiful childhood friendships, they can continue even with a 30-year hiatus.
Amazing. And I think this is the beautiful side of social media, because how else would I have found you? How else would I connect with all the people that I speak to on this podcast? And speaking to people and finding out how people tick and what people say, I think makes the world better.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the reason I love doing podcasts is, I have interviewed a lot of people that I know, but other people introduce their friends to me for my podcast. And I am enchanted with meeting other human beings and discovering their stories, listening to them, and forming this web of connection. I love it. It makes my heart happy. And I think, the more that we can do that, the more that we can meet people who are strangers or different than us. I think this world, there's potential for more beauty being brought into the world.
Totally. And more understanding and more tolerance.
Absolutely. Yes. Two
Yeah.
thumbs up.
Yeah. So connector of people, I think that already, sums up, goes back to to that school. I mean, when your friends say that you connect easily, that you are open, and because you do that, you want other people to do that. Do I understand right?
Yeah, I totally think so. I mean, I lived in Santa Fe for 8 years. And during the time that I lived there, I had a few people say, "Oh my gosh, how do you know everyone here?" And it's really interesting. Someone needs help with this, you bring that other person to them that can help. Someone needs help with this, you know the right person to connect them to. And I think it took me a long time to understand that, guess what? This isn't all about me. This life is not all about me. My experience is not all about me. And the only way we're going to help each other or lift this world up or be of service to each other is if I can facilitate bringing other people's art or their poetry or their words or their work into the world. And if I can help someone by connecting them, that makes me excited and it makes me really happy. So it's one way that I can be of service. It's a strange way of being of service, but it's one way that I can be of service.
I think it's a very good way. And I think just, again, coming back to social media, as you say, helping somebody, sharing something, it doesn't cost us anything to just, and you introduce this person to your side of your friends. And that's how connections are made. And that's how, again, more tolerance and more understanding is created.
Absolutely. And I just had my third book launch at the end of April in Santa Fe. And, I had all these, I think like 25 people showed up, which was really great. All dear friends. I love them so much. And I just looked over and two of the women that I love so much were talking to each other. And at the end they said, we're going to get together and hang out and be friends. And I thought, oh, yes, this is what I want. The people I love to know each other because they're all amazing.
Yes, and
And
you did
so,
that. You did.
yes,
Yes,
it
yes.
makes me so happy.
Yeah, I
Yes.
totally understand what you mean. Now, if you grow up like you did, like born in one country, then going to the other one, and then going to Pakistan and this and that, does that automatically instill a travel bug?
Oh gosh, you know what? I'm the oldest kid in the family. My sister and brother are both married with kids. And I'm the oldest, not married, no kids. And I have led a life that has been unconventional. So I graduated from college, worked for a corporation a couple years, thought this cannot be my life. I cannot do this. I had a moment of panic one day where I couldn't breathe. And around the same time, a dear friend from childhood who was living on the West Coast up in Washington said, hey, I think I'm going to be here more permanently. She was working for Microsoft. She said, I think this is where I'm going to live. And I thought, oh my gosh, I know nothing about that part of the world. I might sell everything I own and come out there. And I did. And I moved to Bellingham, Washington. I lived there for about 2.5 years and it was beautiful, but really small. And I thought,
It rains a
okay,
lot, though, doesn't
it
it?
rains a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then I moved to Portland and I lived there for, gosh, 20 plus years. But every few years, I would have to go somewhere for 3 to 6 months. So 1 year, I went and I lived at the Oregon coast for 4 months. A few years after that, I came back to Chicago and spent the summer with my family. A few years after that, I went to Palm Beach Gardens down in Florida, and I spent 3 to 4 months helping my dear friend go through her Parkinson's brain surgery. And then a few years after that, I left and I went and I walked the Camino for 3 to 4 months. And so, yes, to say that I am restless and am always thinking of the next journey would be an understatement. It's caused a little bit of stress and unhappiness in my family because they want me to live a quote unquote conventional life, have money, be secure, have a home, and be grounded.
Mhm.
And that's just not me. It's not what speaks to me. It's not what calls to me. I love the adventure of the open road, and you never know who you're going to meet and what kind of conversation you're going to have or what kind of friendship you're going to strike up. And yes, it can be scary. Yes, it can be really uncertain. Yes, it can be super depressing and lonely and alienating, but it can also be incredibly beautiful. So,
Amazing, amazing. I mean, now there is a few things there's a lot of stuff that you said in this last little paragraph. One thing that I want to say is that, you were saying that you lived in Oregon and Florida in different places. The United States of America are beautiful and very big. And people often make fun of Americans who never have a passport. But at the end of the day, they don't really need one because they have everything.
yeah. I mean, if you want to go to the mountains, we have them. If you want
Uh-huh.
to go to the beaches, we've got the beaches. If you want
Desert.
to go to the middle of the desert or the prairie, we've got plenty of that. And right now, I'm actually in Arkansas on the Gulf Coast. So, which is kind of swampy and wet and humid, but also incredibly gorgeous. So, yes, we do. We have a lot of stuff here.
You definitely do. I used to be a tour guide and I toured in the US for a few years. So I actually know it very, very well. And I often tell that to people because fine, of course, there's a world outside the US, but you can do a lot of things and experience a lot of things within the US. And it's very, very different from one coast to the other and from north to south.
Absolutely. And what I've discovered is just if you have an open heart, because I'm in the South, right? And the South is known for being conservative, and, the media does such a great job of spinning all this stuff. But if you have an open heart and you're kind and you're willing to just have a conversation and be welcoming, you can talk to anyone and form friendship with anyone. And so that's kind of what I live by when I travel.
I think it's a little bit like Europe, because it's just different countries. But I think the south of Europe, I live in Cyprus, and the south of Europe, Greece, Italy, Spain, it's the same thing. It's also, I think the light and the weather make a difference already. It makes you more open-minded. You live outside a lot more, so you get to speak to people more. Whereas in the north, you're more in. It's more. It's cold. It's different. So I think the mentality is also affected by the temperature.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, look, that's why I love the monsoons when I lived in Pakistan, because going outside was a nightmare. And you take a shower, and then 5 minutes later, after going outside, you need to take another shower.
Yes,
So
yes.
not only did I worship the monsoon, I worshiped the air conditioner as well as a child. So.
It's like here in the summers here in Cyprus are hot and humid. I know exactly what you're talking about. The Camino.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What kind of an experience did you have? Because I've spoken to many people who've done the Camino. What was yours?
Well, I wasn't religious, and I'm not religious. I'm a panentheist, but starting, I don't know, I had this series of inexplicable, bizarre events happen for about a year and a half before I actually walked the Camino, that were these messages that just came to me over and over in the most bizarre ways that led me to walking the Camino. Otherwise, I would have never done the Camino in a million years. But once I started researching and understood that's what I wanted to do, I chose a route that was known for how solitary it was. I did a lot of research, and how physically arduous, because I thought, if I'm going to do this, if I'm being called to do this, then I'm going to do it in a way that's authentic, because the Le Puy route is kind of known as the party route, which is not a bad thing. You meet tons of people, you drink wine, you eat. But I thought, if I'm going to do this like the old pilgrims of old. So I started in southern France. I was just frantic because I didn't speak French. I had no idea what I was doing. Even though I'd gotten all these signs, I didn't even know why I was there. And the first day I got my little passport where you get stamped every day. And I was walking around the city of Arles, which I finally figured out how to pronounce it. I was saying Arles, and nobody had any idea what I was saying. I was walking around Arles doing some house, just looking at tourist stuff and everything, and I lost the passport. So I went back to the passport office, and I walked up to the woman, and she said, "Oh, you're back." And I said, "Yes, I lost my passport." And she said, "How did you do that?" And I said, "I'm just in a rush. I'm trying." And she said, "Okay, this is not about being in a rush. You need to slow down. You're going to miss the entire point of this if you don't pay attention. Here's a new one. Guard it with your life, but you need to slow down." And from there, that kind of informed my journey. And I ended up walking about 2.5 months. I tell everybody I did it alone. France had the worst weather they'd had in 90 years. It rained and snowed and hailed on me in May. Most people quit because the weather was so terrible. So most days I was walking alone. And not only that, because it's such a solitary route, the villages are so small. And the woman at the tourist office said, "I don't think this is a good idea. If you get hurt, something bad could happen. You don't speak French. These villages are unfriendly." I said, "Look, I was called to do this for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm doing it." And so it was really all about faith. And I started walking. And the first day, I brought one bottle of water and walked 28 kilometers, and I almost died. And after that, I realized this is nothing to sneeze at. I need to be more prepared. But I had a movie version of the Camino. I had a ridiculous movie version. I had people leaning out of their windows wishing me bonne journée. I walked into this one town. I took 2 or 3 days there. When I left, I stayed in a hotel because every part of my body was soaked. Everything I owned was soaked. So I was drying everything off. And this woman who owned this hotel said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm walking the Camino." And she said, "Alone?" And I said, "Yes." And as I left the breakfast, she brought me this huge hamper of food to put into my pack for free. I had a woman stop me in another village, gorgeous, long gray hair. She grabbed my face in the middle of the road and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm walking the Camino." And she said, "Alone?" And she just talked to me and held me and blessed me. Have told people I've never felt more love, just love from complete strangers in an entire country than when I was in France. And I had this experience of feeling like I was taken care of along the way. I made friends, but it wasn't easy. I mean, it was really hard. It rained pretty much every day. I was covered in mud. One day I was going through the countryside and there had been a hatch of froglings. There were millions, there must have been millions of frogs everywhere. And I just remember trying not to step on them and failing utterly. It was one of the more beautiful experiences of my entire life. And I can't explain it. I just had to show up. And then I was in Spain. I was walking in July, I think it was. They say not to walk in summer. I was climbing the side of this cliff. I didn't know it was so crazy steep. And I was in the woods and I had that moment you have. For me, it was embarrassing because I thought, oh my goodness, this is what happens in every movie. I howled, howled out to the wilderness. I broke. I completely broke. I was on my hands and knees. I was profoundly dehydrated. I hadn't gone to the bathroom for about 3 days. I was so screwed up and I just howled. And as soon as I finished howling, I thought, oh gosh, I hope no one heard that. And then I thought, oh my goodness, this is the thing in the movie that's so boring and predictable. And I can't believe I just did that. And then the fourth thing was this thought that I had. And the first thing I thought was, oh dear, I shouldn't be having that thought. That I need to unpack that and see what that actually means and why that came up. And then the second I howled and I had those thoughts, there was this calm that came over me. And this message just was like, okay, you came and you did what you were supposed to do. You don't have to get to Santiago. You can now go lay in a hotel room and rehydrate because that's what you need to do. And so after that, I took the ferry to Cornwall and spent 3 weeks in Cornwall, traveling all around Cornwall, made some dear friends. And then I took the Queen Mary back to New York. And I tell everyone I'm ruined because the Queen Mary, they do breakfast in bed. They give you a bottle of champagne when you enter the room. And then there's the world's fluffiest robe in that room. And you can just walk around in that robe everywhere. And I was utterly happy. And it was the trip of a lifetime.
Good God. Like going from the mud and the frogs and the howling onto the Queen Mary.
Yes.
That is definitely an experience. But I want to ask you something. You were talking about signs. I'm not religious. I'm spirit. I mean, I believe that what goes out comes back in. You know, I believe in the good in people. But what kind of signs do you want to talk about?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I believe that we're not using our intuition enough. We're not listening to ourselves. What kind of signs did you have?
Well, so I talked to you before about how I went to Palm Beach Gardens to be with my friend who had Parkinson's. So I was there for about 2.5 months or so, maybe 3 months. And then she passed away the next year. She had a really rare form of Parkinson's where she was diagnosed and died within 5 years. It was very aggressive. And I loved her so much. She was one of the more important people in my life, a former boss at my corporate job. We just had this connection that was inexplicable. And so she passed away. And later that year, the next year, I went to this feast day at this monastery outside of Portland. And the woman sitting next to me at the feast day was a carbon copy of my dear friend who had died, from the jewelry and the hair and everything. It was eerie. And I remember being a little weirded out by it. But afterwards, I started talking to her, and she was a Presbyterian minister. And she said, you know, in the course of our conversation, oh, I'm going to walk the Camino next year. I'm really excited about it. And I thought, what is that? I don't even know what that is. And so we talked a little bit about it, but then my partner at the time, who was Catholic, he said, oh, the Camino, let's talk about it. So a few months later, he got me some travel guides for the Camino. So I was reading it and I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's really, yeah, it sounds cool, but I'm never going to do that. I'm not Catholic. And then about 6 months later, a dear friend said, oh my goodness, she called me and she said, I just watched this sweet movie. I'm going to send it to you. She sent me a DVD because this is when DVDs still existed.
Yeah.
And I got it and I watched it, and it was The Way by Emilio Estevez and Martin Sheen. And it's this movie about walking the Camino. And I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. It's a little maudlin, but you know, now I guess I get to see what it's like and what it's all about. I mean, okay, fine. Yeah, great. And then a few months after that, I was getting acupuncture. My acupuncturist said, "Oh, yeah, my mom walked the Camino and she broke her ankle and she had to stop. She did about 300 miles." And I was like, does everybody know about this except me? Have I been living in a cave? So I just thought, what a weird coincidence. And then 3 months later, another friend that I met when I lived on the Oregon coast, she called me and she said, "Okay, I'm just going to let you know, I'm cleaning out my mother's study." They'd moved her mother to an Alzheimer's care unit. And she said, "I'm cleaning out the house. The study is a nightmare. She's kept everything for decades. And I'm going through each piece of paper because we don't know what's important." And she said, "I came across this travel pamphlet. It's so weird. And I feel like I'm compelled to mail it to you. I don't know why, but I'm putting it in the mail. This is really bizarre. I'm giving you a heads up, but it's for you." And I was like, "Okay, that's really weird." And it came in the mail a few days later, and it was a travel guide from the 1960s for the Camino. And I thought to myself, am I going insane? What is happening? So whenever I have that question and I'm a little freaked out by what's happening, I go to my tarot deck and I pick a card. So I had my tarot deck out. I picked a card, and the first card came up and it said, "You have not been listening to the messages we've been sending you." And I thought to myself, I just sat down on my bed. I plunked down and I looked up at the sky, because you do. And I said, "You've got to be beep, 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 kidding me, because you want me to walk the Camino? This is absurd. I am not religious. I don't do things like this. I don't hike with a backpack. What are you even talking about? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And by the way, I would have to leave my job, leave my house, leave my animals. I don't know what you think you're doing, but whatever." And so I wrestled with it for a couple of weeks, talked to my partner. He was kind of interested in it and also was like, "I don't think you should do that." But then one day I just thought, okay, the overwhelming amount, this is stupid, but I guess I'm supposed to do this. I'm very, by the way, stubborn and feel like the universe nags me. So I'm very annoyed in general when I get asked to do anything out of my comfort zone. So there was a lot of grumbling. But honestly, once I decided to walk the Camino, every single roadblock and thing blew out of my way. And a friend said, "I'll come and stay at your house and take care of your animals." All these things, they just blew out of the way, and it was completely facilitated. And before I knew it, I took a ship from Miami to Barcelona. So I took the Norwegian Epic to Barcelona. Someone found a friend that I stayed with for a week in Barcelona. Then I took 3 trains to southern France, got off on the train, and that's how my adventure began. So yeah, those are my signs.
How amazing. How amazing. I think those were enough signs. I wonder what would have happened to you if you hadn't listened.
Gosh, you know what? I do ask myself that question all the time. And I just think, oh my goodness, I would have gotten sick. It felt like this journey that I had always done. Like if we talk about paths or people living paths or the right road in their lives, it felt like I'd already done the Camino, or it felt like an appointment that I had promised to, when my soul was coming in, and that I just had to show up for it. So I always think to myself, if I wouldn't have shown up, I do believe that I would have gotten sick, like something bad would have happened.
Amazing. Tell
Yeah.
me, did that ever happen again? Were you called to do something else or to go somewhere else? Or was that it? Were you, after that, you were through with it?
Oh gosh. Well, no, I mean, that happens to me over and over again. I've actually also had other instances where complete strangers come up to me and tell me something. This is my friends say to me, "Kirsten, you never have to worry about where you're supposed to go because you're just told over and over and over again." And in subtle ways and overt ways, like random strangers coming up to me and telling me things that are, I don't know. My friends just say to me, "We don't even understand your life." But, I started investigating going to seminary and getting my master's of divinity. And I was in Portland at the time. And so I was wrestling with all these schools. Where should I go? All of these things. This is just a small example. And for about 2 or 3 months, every single person I was meeting was from Denver. Every single stranger was from Denver. And one of the seminaries I was looking at to go to was in Denver. And so I didn't even bother applying to any of the other seminaries because I thought, okay, I'm already being told I'm going to Denver. I already know this. I'm just going to apply to the one in Denver because I already know I'm getting in. And I got in. So, they can be really subtle messages, but you have to be paying attention.
Exactly. But
Um,
that's what I was going to say to the people who are listening to us, because we may not notice those messages. We may not listen. Sometimes we end up being pushed into something because we didn't listen, maybe a little bit abruptly.
Absolutely. And those can be painful,
Hmm.
right? Because
Hmm.
even though all the signs or the messages, we're ignoring them because maybe they'll make us uncomfortable or they'll disrupt our lives. Or, I've discovered that once I stop complaining and whining about what I'm being asked or requested to do, because I look at it as a call to adventure, right? So it's an invitation. The Camino was an invitation. I say I would have gotten sick. I do believe that, but I
Hmm.
was also gently invited, like, hey, here are all these messages. Why don't you think about walking the Camino? And so I stepped forward into the adventure. And
Hmm.
so, yes, while I said, I don't want to leave my house, I don't want to leave my job, this is going to be an inconvenience, I also understood that it was being asked of me to step into my life,
Hmm.
to be more fully present in my life
Hmm.
and to to start co-creating with whatever's behind the scenes in a
Yeah,
more conscious way. And
yeah,
for me, that's exciting, you
yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yes, I agree. Now, my podcast is called Most Memorable Journeys. Do you think the Camino was your most memorable journey, or is there more? Is there something else
Oh gosh, yes, I would say the Camino was the most memorable
memorable
journey.
journey?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because, it was something that I wouldn't ordinarily do.
Hmm.
I was asked to do something that was outside of my comfort zone, and I stepped up to the plate and I did it.
Hmm.
And I could have run the other direction. I could have done it with a lot less grace. I could have done it with a lot more complaining. Believe me, I am a world-class whiner. But once I calmed down and understood that this was just a part of my life that I'd already lived and I was showing up for something that had already been requested of me, that's when all the magic started. That's when I had these encounters with other humans that were so beautiful, and with the French forest, and with those frogs, and
Hmm.
with, there's nothing like walking through the remote French countryside and coming over a rise, and there's an 800-year-old church on the next rise. There's nothing like walking through rain day after day. You go through a small French village, everything's shut down except for the church that's open. So you can step in out of the rain. The church isn't lit, it's only candles because and these churches are hundreds of years old. And you can take your time, sort of dry off a little bit, look at the art, say a prayer, light a candle. There's nothing like finding a place to rest in the midst of a journey or a travel and being surrounded by silence, the smell of incense and art, and feeling safe for a little bit before stepping back out in the rain.
That is
So
so
yes,
beautiful. That's very beautiful the way you just explained this. I mean, and I think when we are tourists or visitors, I think when we visit these temples or churches or monasteries, I don't think we should sit down. I watch people visiting churches or visiting monasteries here in Cyprus as well. You just go inside, you look, walk around, and you look, and then you leave again. But I think one should actually sit down and allow it to affect you.
absolutely breathe a little bit. It's
Yes,
okay to take a little time off and breathe a little bit.
yes, totally. So we're getting to the end. We're already very close. What's next for Kirsten? What is happening with you? Are you going to go anywhere? Are you going to be called to go somewhere? Have there been any signs? What's coming up?
Well, right now I'm in the Gulf Coast house sitting. I just spent 6 months taking care of my mother outside of Chicago. My stepfather passed away, so I moved from Santa Fe up there to take care of her. She let me know that it's time for her to be alone now. She wants to process what's been happening. So I'm house sitting for a dear friend on the Gulf Coast. And then next week I go to the Oregon coast and I'm going to live there for the summer and house sit for a dear friend, work a little bit. And then in the fall, I'm going to Santa Fe. So I'll be down there for about a month. And then after that, who knows?
There might be
Who
a
knows what
sign. Who
adventures await?
knows? Who knows?
Yes, who knows?
Yeah, I think Santa Fe is also a very, very, the people who are listening to us and don't know Santa Fe, before we end, I love it and it's special. What do you feel about Santa Fe?
Well, I think Santa Fe is one of those places that has, of course, a very deep history with the indigenous inhabitants, the Spanish coming in and colonizing, and now Western white societies coming in. So it has a very deep history that you need to respect and understand that you're on this land that is very conflicted, but also very nurturing and beautiful. But it is an art mecca. It is a place of eccentrics. It's a place of great, inspiring beauty. And people who go there, you go there to have an adventure and to heal, because people always say Santa Fe will either invite you in when you come or it will kick you out. And you will know within a few months whether you're called to be there. And over again, I've seen people come and try to live there, and Santa Fe says, nope, it's not your time. So it's a place to go to do deep healing, and I think to also discover your authentic self and to have adventure, because New Mexico is an incredible place with caves and lakes and mountains, but it's high desert. So it's stark. The colors are unlike any you'll see in the world. And it's all surrounded by this incredible deep history of human habitation. So as long as you go there with the right respect and open to beauty, you'll be fine.
I think that's the perfect way to end this episode. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Kirsten Rudberg.
Thank you. This has been so fun and it went so fast.
I know. Thank you very much.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.